Ninth grade. Ninth grade.
What?
I swear to God.
No Antigone, no Rhyme and Ancient Mariner.
Rhyme and Ancient Mariner's not there. That's the only one. Antigone's right here. This is Antigone, this little sliver. Yeah.
I had to have read more than that.
Nope. That's it. So now you know you're
Well, they
reading
have the Odyssey.
more than twice as much.
They have the Odyssey.
We do have the Odyssey.
And
Laughing Sutra.
yeah.
Um, so I guess I could write on the board.
I think that would work.
Do you want to do that? I'm not even sure how to do this.
There you go.
Okay.
I had trouble finding quotes in Elegance of the Hedgehog.
Elegance of the Hedgehog.
Because
Yeah.
we didn't really annotate it. We were sort of asked to read it in something.
only have like 3 lines highlighted.
And I also couldn't find any specific themes other than like class conscience and sort of perception of beauty, and that's kind of about it.
Well, the main one is appearance versus reality.
Yeah, because like Paloma and like she thought, and everybody thought she was like this normal girl to get all these profoundly crazy thoughts, and then like
Mm-hmm.
she pretended to be like serious, like oh, don't have
Yeah. So she dressed all frumpy and acted dumb. Both of them. Well, Renee probably acted dumb more than Paloma. Paloma just kind of keeps to herself. Although Paloma does too, right? In school, she pretends to not know what's going on. So that's the main thing with appearance versus reality, and you can connect that. When I think of especially looks, oppressing your beauty, I think of like Their Eyes Watching God, right?
Yeah.
And I guess
Appearance versus reality could go with really all of these.
with all of them, absolutely. Um, so actually, what we're going to do today in class is we're going to practice 2 essays, but we could talk about appearance versus reality. Like, we want to go through those texts. I could kind of like model for you like how you should probably be studying in terms of the comparison chart. So why don't we take those texts?
Which one do you want to start with? You want to start in like chronological order?
Yeah, let's do that. So
Okay, so Elegance of the Hedgehog.
Elegance of the Hedgehog. And then Catcher in the Rye. Okay, elegance, appearance versus reality. And if you have your book with you, if you want to find quotes or something related to that, you can. I mean, I just remember like right off the bat, she tells us, I think in chapter 1, how page 20. I have extraordinary good fortune to be the concierge of a very high-class sort of building. It was so humiliating for me to have to cook such loathsome dishes that when Monsieur de Broglie, the state counselor on the first floor, intervened, an intervention he described to his wife as being courteous but firm, whose only intention was to rid our communal habitat of such plebeian effluvia, common trash. It came as an immense relief once I concealed as best I could beneath an expression of reluctant compliance. So you see there, she's like, the way she acts with the other people in the building, she pretends to not know what's going on, to just be. And then Paloma on the next page, profound thought number 1, page 23. Even now, if you look at children my age, there's an abyss between us. And since I don't really want to stand out, and since intelligence is very highly rated in my family, an exceptionally gifted child would never have a moment's peace. I try to scale back my performance at school, but even so, I always come first. So she's trying to scale back her performance. Right? And there's so many others, but I guess why don't we go on the next one? Yeah. What I would be doing though is looking through each one of these. Hey, what's up? Oh my God. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. That sounds good. All right. Okay. So why don't we move on to the next one? Catcher. Appearance versus reality. What do you think?
Well, like the one part of it when he's like was acting like he didn't care about like Stradlater and the girl or whatever what they did, and he was acting like he was so happy for her, but in reality he wasn't at all.
Right.
He really liked her.
Chapter.
Or it was Jane.
Like page 40. He says, God, how I hated him. Right?
Wait, on 40?
You could close your eyes, flip through the book, and just put your finger down and find appearance versus reality with Catcher in the Rye. Because what's the main thing about Holden? What's his sort of conceit? What's that?
Doesn't he like hate phonies, but he is one himself?
He says he hates phonies. He says he hates Stradlater, but ultimately he hates himself, right? He doesn't. He thinks mainly who's a phony.
The adults.
The adults. But again, this is Holden just projecting his own fears of adulthood, right? So really, anything with Holden Caulfield, we know he's, what we call the unreliable narrator, right? So, unreliable narrator, appearing one way while being another. I'm already seeing the connection. Do you see what's going on, Peter? What do you notice is the sort of difference, similarity?
Well, they're both the narrators who are.
They're both the narrators.
And they both, yeah.
But in one case, we have an unreliable narrator who doesn't know what he truly feels, versus Paloma, who's like intentionally appearing one way while being another.
But she's still,
she's conscious of who she is. She knows she's smart, but she pretends to be stupid. Whereas Holden pretends to hate other people and hate adulthood, when really he's scared of it. He hates himself. He's scared of himself. Right? I'm already seeing that connection. But that's just, I think you can make other connections. But if you're writing an essay and you got 5 minutes to think about it, that's where I would go. What about Hamlet?
Yeah. Oh, the antidispositions.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
That's like the most. I forget exactly what page. Oh, 67. I don't know. Yes, it's at the bottom where it's like.
Yeah.
Line 189.
Yes, 67. You're right.
Act 1, Scene 5.
Great. That whole speech. Right, here as before, never so help you mercy, how strange or odd summer I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter shall think meet to put an antic disposition on. That you at such times seeing me never shall with arms encumbered thus, with his head shake, or by pronouncing of some doubtful phrase. So he's saying, if next time you see me, if you see I'm kind of acting funny, just know that I'm putting on this antic disposition. In terms of that connection between each one of these, Hamlet's probably more sort of in line with Paloma, at least at first, right?
Then you like any kind of
But later.
And then the big turn, the big sort of ambiguity about the story, amongst all other ambiguities, is we're not sure if Hamlet still has control. Whereas Paloma, maybe, I think you could find a quote or two that shows, by the end of the story, Paloma is still in control of her appearance versus reality scenario. So that's good. What about interpreter maladies? In terms of appearance versus reality, there's like, third and final continent, you could make an argument, but I think for appearance versus reality, amongst those three stories, there's the one about the lights going out, temporary matter. There's the one about the tourists in India. Interpreter malady is the title story. And then there's third and final continent. I'd say like the first two. I don't know about you. The first two seem more like appearance versus reality issues. For interpreter maladies, for temporary matter, both people are hiding something, right?
Yeah.
Really, by the end of the story, the lights come back on, and ironically, right? Lights go on, truth comes out. And then he turns the lights off, and they sit there. There's this great line at the end. They wept together for things they now knew. So now the truth comes out. Here's a line, page 21, in the middle. It sickened Shakumar knowing that she had spent these past evenings preparing for a life without him. He was relieved, and yet he was sickened. This was what she'd been trying to tell him for the past 4 evenings. This was the point of her game. And even that game idea, we've seen that before, right? Like, with definitely with Elegance of a Hedgehog, definitely with Hamlet. Hamlet sort of considers this to be a sort of game. Even puts on the play
Tale of Two Cities too.
Tale of Two Cities, yeah.
There's a game in Texas?
Like,
Oh, the wine game.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, that's a little different, right?
yeah.
That's not appearance versus reality as much as. Although I guess you could argue that. I guess say that there's the appearance that they're just fighting over the wine, but maybe in reality this is like the beginning of a much more violent. Anyway, but what's the main thing? Tale of Two Cities. I don't know. Give me a character who's appearing one way, being something different. Carton. When we first meet him, he's in the courtroom. What's he doing?
Nothing. He's just like looking around.
Yeah, he's all like lying back. And then it seems like he's just not even like paying attention. But then boom, Lucy faints, and he all of a sudden jumps up and catches her. He's like, "What? Take care of this woman. What are you guys doing?" So he's clearly like aware of everything that's going on.
What about Madame Defarge?
Yeah.
Because to me, she seemed quite innocent, and even like at the start of the book, it seemed like she was maybe like leading. She was the head of a just cause, but then like as it went around, and she just became more and more bloodthirsty, doing more.
I like that.
Okay.
I think both Cardin and Defarge sort of appear innocent at first, or innocent not like in a moral sense, but in terms of what they know. But I love that idea that Madame Defarge appears just too, moral, all those things. So sort of stepping back, in that case, if she's just and she's appearing to be just and moral, but really has this deep vengeance that she wants. Do you think that she is playing a game?
I don't know. I feel like she takes it too seriously for it to be considered a game, because it's like they have to die because of what they put me through.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking in terms of like, Paloma intentionally acting stupid when she knows she's a genius. how much does Madame Defarge in that same way know she's sort of driven by vengeance, right? Is it?
It's just kind of having fun, like committing their names, and like when she sees at the courthouse or something, Dr. Manette can't save me now, and she like smiles.
Maybe that's what makes her deceptive, is how you see at first she appears to be morally innocent, but she really isn't. So maybe it's hard to know if she actually is trying to be like that, or when
She's
Versailles.
just quiet and she's more patient. So
Yeah.
It seems like she's innocent, but yeah.
But I think this is interesting. Like I think it is a little ambiguous if we, for us to know if she knows how perhaps unethical or immoral she's acting, right? Like maybe she does. I don't think we get any evidence to know that she feels like she's doing something just and moral.
But like,
She doesn't even really think about that.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't think she can.
like she
Yeah.
kind of gets like. So then she's like a microcosm for the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Like the French Revolution got taken over by like it was bigger than any one person.
Yeah.
It just got taken over by outside forces and no one could control it. And maybe that's what
It quickly turned from being about justice and social inequalities to just being about pure revenge.
And that's what like Madame Defarge feels, and then she can like
Great.
control it.
So I think if you were doing an essay, what I would do is this. I'd create the little Venn diagram, and this is, you don't need to write much because you try and work out a lot of this in your head, but the connection I'm seeing between them is that each character we've talked about has some level of control over their own appearance versus reality, right? That's just one angle. You could totally go a different angle with that. You could say there's other similarities and differences. Maybe you could talk about, how much, I don't know, other people are influenced by their appearance. Do people buy into their appearance, or do they maybe not? Do people believe Paloma is stupid? Do people believe in people believe in Holden's game of thinking everyone's phonies and hating Stradlater? Do people believe in Hamlet and his antic disposition?
Well, yeah.
Right? So that's like another angle. You could go a lot of directions with that, right? Cool. Moving on. Let's do another theme.
Oh, the thing I wanted to talk about was like, because I was curious. I was trying to learn about the kids. Sheets was like crime and like violence in the book, but I didn't see it. I don't know. I saw it in Tale of Two Cities, of course, but then I didn't see like crime in any other really book. So is that like something we should be like focusing on?
Is that like some other classes doing crime and violence?
Yeah, they had like a big study thing on crime and violence and crime, and I was like, what?
Is that Miller?
I don't know.
Sounds like a Miller. Crime and violence. No, that's just each class has their own thing, but I think in terms of what would be our version of that, which could be on the exam, that idea of like rioting and movements, or people getting carried away in different ways. Mob mentality, but even like like Madame Defarge and her feelings about the revolution. I think you could connect that to interpretive maladies, the sort of romantic vision of how you perceive things to be. Actually, that's from our kind of along the lines of our practice essay question today.
What about authenticity?
Authenticity, yeah.
You're either watching that, he's going back self-searching, so he's going down the roads to she finds what makes her happy.
Absolutely. There's like sort of like catching the rye for appearance versus reality. This is like the authenticity book, right? You could flip to any page and it would be there. Yeah. Yeah, you could talk about towards the beginning.
What's the one with the speech where
Jody.
Explain.
yeah, where Jody like becomes the mayor and they ask her to like give a speech.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's with their voice, right? That was yeah.
Well, that's just sort of the. I mean, it's kind of obvious that she doesn't really have.
There's not the part where she was just like, when she was like looking in the mirror or whatever, and she was like, I was like surprised that, like, she thought she was white or something, I think, and then like when she looked in the mirror, she was actually not, and she was like, whoa, I'm not.
Yeah.
Or that was the they took a picture of her and she couldn't figure out who she was.
That's you out, right?
The speech is on page 41 to
She's like, I ain't never give no speech no more or whatever. I think that was the quote.
and here look at like page 41. She had her first taste of presiding over it the day it was complete and finished. Jody, this was the lamppost. Jody told her to dress up and stand in the store all that evening. Everybody was coming sort of fixed up, and he didn't mean for nobody else's wife to rank with her. She must look on herself as the bell cow. The other women were the gang. So think of like and what do you think of when you think of cows? It's like this like herd mentality, this sheepish kind of just following orders.
The other women were the what?
What's that?
What was the other women?
They were her gang.
Gang.
Yeah.
Oh, and weren't they setting up a lamppost and that symbolized like
Yeah.
finding yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's like 41 to 48 is the speech about the lamp.
The picture one was like chapter 2, I think.
So I brought up another. So there's the mirror.
Well, at the end of chapter 3, it says, she knew not that marriage did not make love. Jenny's first dream was dead, so she became a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of like the journey to it. At least that's what I wrote.
Yeah. So I think we there's so many things in this. You know this book.
Yeah.
What about like accurate? How do you find authenticity?
Yeah. Good question. Yep.
What's the difference between authenticity and finding your identity?
Yeah. And we've talked about that too, right? There's like the journey towards self-realization, we call it, right? And then authenticity. All of these things kind of relate, right? Even appearance versus reality.
Yeah.
I think they are very similar.
Okay.
And
So if that was like a potential exam topic, can we like link finding identity and authenticity together?
yes,
Okay.
I think so.
To like all the other books, like a character for each book, or like. Yeah, how would you suggest we go about that?
Well, you're gonna on the exam you have 2 essay questions, and each one asks you to. You're gonna be told to write about something like Perhaps Watching God, and then you're gonna be given a choice of like Catcher and Hamlet and and you're gonna have to connect 3 different pieces, 2 stories you've read. For each essay, you have to compare 2 stories you've read and then 1 new thing. The first essay is the excerpt that you're gonna read. The second essay is the poem. So, yeah, you're not going to be asked to connect all these things. So if
You
you're
have to use examples from the text to relate back to that theme.
exactly,
Okay.
and you're going to be given some choices. So if you're not a big fan of Tale of Two Cities or whatever, you can skip that. But on each essay, we do ask you that everyone talk about one thing in particular. So we might say everyone has to talk about Tale of Two Cities, and they get to choose from 3 others. So you've got to be ready for everything.
In terms of reading the poem and managing time, I feel like I don't want to like spend too much time analyzing the poem and not have enough time to evaluate.
but I also don't want to just miss something big as I go through it and start to write about something. It's like how much investigation do you think we should do on the poem? You know?
On the poem, I think the poem will be simple enough that you'll read it through, maybe annotate it, work on those questions first. We'll ask you questions like, what's the symbolism on line 4? And after you've answered those questions, I think you'll have a good enough feeling for what's the main theme. And the prompt will say, talk about this in the poem and 2 other texts. And you'll be like, okay, I can do this.
How long do you think we should?
And then do this, like do the 2 texts, and then the poem should be third. Yeah.
Are we will be able to write on the poem and circle and stuff?
Yes. You get a paper copy of that.
And but we can't have highlighters.
I hadn't thought about that.
Because I think I asked you it earlier. I might not have.
Yeah. I don't know. That's why I'm not sure the answer to that question. I'll have to ask around. I mean, even if you don't have highlighters, you can use a pen or a pencil. I think actually that would be taking too much time to be taking off tops and doing different colors. I think you should now at this point be able to read the poem, remember, you're looking at metaphors, symbolism, and connotations. Those are the 3 major components that can tell you the theme. And sometimes even the rhythm and the rhyme of the poem can. But so you read the poem, you see, oh, there's this he uses he describes the hose as being like a snake that sort of it's like a connotation of evil, and maybe an allusion to even the Garden of Eden. You start kind of putting that together, and then maybe there's evil in Tale of Two Cities and Hamlet. And illusions.
A lot of illusions.
So, yeah, actually Hamlet, there's the serpent, right? They originally think it's a snake bite.
The serpent that bites
King Hamlet. Yeah. So yeah, I think the poem is, like I've told you guys in class, the poem is easier than what we've covered. What we've covered has been sort of the weights on the back, right? But so you read the poem, you'll understand what's going on in the poem, and you just need to look for the theme. And what I do is forget the highlighters, just be circling any word choice or any line or phrase that relates to that theme. And then you can start putting it all together.
Will we have to relate it back to that stuff, saying blah 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 and why I think that? Yeah.
You can on the exam if you're on line 3 of the poem they use this snake metaphor that relates in some way to Hamlet, then you can definitely use the term metaphor or connotation or whatever. So I would review that sheet, but you're not responsible for listing off those terms. It's not on exam. So, but I would do this. I would literally, flip the exam over, and on the back, create this Venn diagram. Even just to visually, maybe you just write 2 things in it, just to get you just to get your brain focused. And then you need to think about what's the connection, what's the main similarity, and difference, right? In terms of this, I was thinking it's people's control over their appearance versus reality. So that's my thesis, and we're going to talk today about how to phrase that, but your thesis should be something like, in all these stories, characters appear one way while being something different. However, you always want your thesis should always have some sort of contrasting statement, especially for a compare and contrast essay. However, each character has a certain level of control over their own appearance or something. Yeah.
For the writing styles and the comparison and contrasting essay, the block method was, I forget what the other one was. For the similarities.
Yeah.
For the similarities, should we put it at the end and relate it to our thesis?
Yeah.
Say that like lists the differences of Hamlet's appearance versus reality and says ultimate, but ultimately there's an ambiguity with Hamlet's um, appearance.
You could. It depends on how you do it. If you want to do that block method, and
Yeah.
and if you don't remember, block method is like, Hamlet is here, Tale of Two Cities, and then your third paragraph would then be like the similarities or the main difference or whatever it is. With a 5-paragraph essay, if you're doing 3 body paragraphs, and you have 3 texts, maybe you lump in the poem or whatever, the excerpt, into one of these paragraphs. So maybe it's something like that.
Oh, that'll work. That'll be okay.
Yeah. And then,
Or can you do 5-paragraph essay format, but 6 paragraphs? Right, so you divide one into like 2, but you still have the same essential structure.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's acceptable. Or you can do the alternating method, which is you just kind of bounce around between each story. But maybe all 3 of these. Here you talk about appearance. This one you talk about reality.
Right, comparison.
And then whatever.
How do you do that so that it like maintains structure? I know that's a very broad question. Like would you want us to talk about like one story, like talk about Hamlet's appearances, toward the reader and to other characters and his interactions, and then move on to a different story, or
It's something like, you could talk about, if in the block method you just talk about Hamlet all the way through. You talk about appearance, reality, and whatever. Then you talk about Tale of Two Cities, appearance, reality, whatever. Poem, same thing. Alternating method, you talk about Hamlet, Tale of Two Cities, and the poem, and how all 3 deal with appearance first, and kind of just bounce back and forth. And then you talk about the reality in each, and then you talk about something else. So both methods, you're covering the same ground, just you're kind of doing it differently. And I think it depends on just how your brain is wired. What do you feel more comfortable with? Usually half the class is divided between one and the other. Yeah.
So you either structure like each paragraph by the book or character.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is simply by topic. This is by the book or the text. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. This is also something I'm going to cover in class today, kind of, but it's good to get confident on this. What else? Anything else? Any other questions about the text? Hey, good haircut. What's the text that's, I don't know, worried about, or
interpreter reality?
elegance and interpreter?
I would say catcher.
Catcher?
Yeah.
I know, I forgot it. I read it
Do you want me to give you some random quotes from Elegance?
Yeah.
I can just take you through it.
Also, the third and final content, I know we probably won't have to refer back to it, but I totally forgot what happened.
Oh, I love that book. With the old lady.
Yeah.
They come to
How about the
America.
tax graph?
Oh, and then she died.
Yeah.
She knew something about it.
It's actually about astronauts.
She was like, they live.
So we have like, I don't know who has class, but we have like somewhere around 5 minutes left. Do you want me to talk about elegance or interpreter? Elegance. Okay. All right. Let's look through it. So you can flip through with me. You can circle things if you want. See you, Molly. All right. Here we go. Renee. She speaking of appearance versus reality, she's all about concealing who she is in terms of her not only her intelligence but her sort of love of literature and the arts, right? And on page 43, she says, I read as if deranged, at first in hiding, and then once it seemed to me that the normal amount of time to learn one's letters had elapsed out in the open for all to see, but I was careful to conceal the pleasure and interest that reading afforded me. Page
Why?
45.
Because of class? Because of her occupation?
Yeah, we get that later, right? Well, there's a couple moments for her. There's the two main moments are, see ya. Oh man, that's a great question. I think part of that has to do with her childhood. The other part, if you remember, was has to do with Renee's husband,
Oh, yeah. I remember her husband.
and both are kind of mysteries that unfold during the story.
Yeah, like did it seem like from like a movie or Hunt for Red October, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she loves the art. She even loves like trashy Hollywood movies, like The Hunt for Red October. She finds that to have a certain beauty to it. Um, class, social inequalities. Paloma, especially, loves to think about social inequalities, and like on chapter, um, page 56. She talks about she was one of those who think that knowledge is power and forgiveness. If I know that I belong to a self-satisfied elite who are sacrificing the common good through an excess of arrogance, that this liberates me from criticism, and I come out with twice the prestige. So she's like she's analyzing and dissecting the sort of thoughts of the upper class. You could clearly connect that to Tale of Two Cities and maybe even Hamlet, the way he sort of analyzes the state of Denmark.
You mean when you talk about social inequality?
What else? Page 80 has a little bit on class. I'm going to go into it. Page 90 does a little more appearance versus reality. Page 93, page 92 and 93, some more appearance versus reality. This is where she observes the adults and how they act with each other, similar to maybe Holden Caulfield. She has this sort of revelation that adults will act cordial and nice to each other while like hating each other. And then Ozu shows up, and there's that whole thing. That's Ozu is the one who, remember, we talked about seeing beyond. There's that quote about seeing beyond. He sees beyond the appearance, beyond the illusion that she puts up the facade.
So Ozu's like, Renee, you are not your sister.
Yeah, nice.
That's the only quote that I remember.
Renee. Oh yeah. Was that the one that?
And then here's speaking of this whole comparison chart. Look at page 136. She says, "I suppose this means I want to be found out." She says to her cat. So she has this sort of moment where she slips with Ozu, and she sort of lets him know in a way that she's smarter than she appears to be. And she even says, "I suppose this means I want to be found out." So even there, like sort of like Holden Caulfield, she has a certain knack for maybe her unconscious driving her to do things that her conscious mind does not. Holden thinks he's appearing one way, but something different beyond even what he knows. Maybe she is truly beyond something beyond what she knows to be herself to be. All right, you gotta run. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.